So what happens is you need to get people involved, private sectors involved, where Mr. Haruna's PPA comes in and involve the private sector in building micro-infrastructure. You know, I go in Dar es Salaam, I end up at corners where buildings are present which are valued at over 1 trillion shillings on a dirt road. On a dirt road. There's no tarmac there. No traffic was actually planned, how many lanes were going to be there, and building was erected. And it's valued at 1 trillion shillings plus. 50 million USD, 100 million USD, 300 million USD. The prices are as comparable to New York City, which you saw a whole bunch of data actually authenticated what I'm just telling you guys from Mr. Bomani's presentation. So that micro-infrastructure, where is it going to come from? Why is it required? Why it's required is that with the 7 million, or I have a number of 7 million because I've been doing some internal research, and that's 7 million, which by census of 2012, you have 4.5 million people in Dar es Salaam with an average growth rate of 5 to 7%, and the migration rate is very high. This is the only urban center in Dar es Salaam, in Tanzania. You are roughly about 6.5 to 7 million people here. With that kind of growth, your 80% of your market cannot actually purchase anything in your commercial nodes. They have to travel to work. They have to come here 1 hour, 1.5 hours from the more distant nodes, which are also urbanized at this point. But that's not a true indication of where your market is headed or where the market demand is. So bringing in developers, I have had the privilege of working with some of the best developers and seeing how the landscape changes over time. And when I say over time, we're not talking decades, we're talking a short term, and in real estate 5 years is really short term period, to a medium term up to 15 years, you can make a huge difference. It's also a matter of educating. So you have land, bring people in, which in other countries, developers come in, they survey the lands, they make sure the land usage is appropriate, they urban plan that land inside or around existing nodes, not 50 kilometers from existing node or not 80 kilometers. I'm not talking go to Kingamboni, Pune, Kingamboni, and try to build something with 400 acres. Even if you build it, nobody's going to come. It's a pyramid in the middle of a desert. Okay, so you have to build it with a community around it. Now, a developer can easily pick up 4, 5, 6, 10, 12 acres. Urbanized planning for 250, which addresses your, or actually authenticates your data, Mr. Bomani, is that sell time frame on houses. Give the consumer what they want through right land usage. Blue ocean strategy is a strategy where you have everybody fishing where the fishing is. They see money, they go fish in commercial. What happens to the guys who actually turn around and they go to the blue ocean, where there's less fish, but they're the only ones fishing? So the market profitability is there. The chances of me catching a fish among a pool of 1,000 fish compared to me trying to catch a fish among 1 million fishermen, I'll take my chances with the less fishermen around. So we have to, as developers, as people who are moving in this segment, in this market, we have to actually pinpoint through research, and a lot of it is available. The general consensus is there are no pricing indexes, there is no trackers available for real estate that could be just tapped onto. But those usually comes from companies like Ernst & Young or KPMG because they're used to buying that data. But if you really mingle with your peers and you walk around, you come across data. Are these university professors, are these universities' land value that they release every year? There's land, there's a massive treasure trove in that university, that segment, that needs to be actually formalized and brought probably through technology, automated, so it could be sent out to masses. So if you are catering to the masses, and there are masses here, which are totally forgotten. Nobody wants to do anything for the low-income housing. You have your average middle class with an NSSF or pension fund of anywhere between 40 to 60 million that he breaks around age 40, 45 to buy that plot to start doing progressive building. So when he's close to retirement, he has a decent home. So when somebody says market is not there, is absolutely untrue. There's a huge market without financial products present right now in Tanzania. Now couple that with the previous government's initiatives and the new ones also. So I'm politically correct all the way through. The mortgage side of things, tagging it along with the dollar value, so that although the shilling wise you're paying a higher interest, but in dollar value you're paying a lower interest. So when the currency changes, it all equates to being like paying 4% at the end of the 15-year period, not 18%. So when the government is doing a lot of stuff to ease the market, ease the consumer in, as an industry we need to educate. A lot of things are harder to implement. You're going to come to somebody and tell them to do their business in a different way than they've been conducting for 20 years, and they're going to have a hard time listening to you. Why? Because my father did it this way, my uncle does it this way, my grandfather did it this way. This is the right way. Unless you start educating politely, start showing them first. Small projects are required. I'm not going to quote research, but being on the ground and gathering our primary data through interviews and other stuff, not geographic or demographic data, but behavioral data. What we have come across on our consumer profiles is people have a need, people are looking towards purchasing, banks are facilitating, there is a product. Majority of the Tanzanians are actually happy with the tax guy being so diligent, reason being the scrupulous amounts of cash which was available in this society just a year and a half ago has pretty much disappeared, which means market has corrected itself. Market is still correcting itself and bringing the real estate values to the right place where they need to be. It's simple economics. Market correction is happening, let it happen. Don't try to stifle it with government easing policies, and we will have a very vibrant market. Listen, qualify, service, your consumers are happy, you're happy, end to end. Karachi is still a very populous, still a very vibrant, still a commercially very viable marketplace for real estate, apart from everything else. So there are new urban centers, and not just because they're there, there's a need for it. So why is there a need? Because all the infrastructure that government invests based upon planning. You have the BRT, it will get to 100% and it will still be a shortage. Why? Because the population is growing, and not because of the birth rates, because of the migration. This is where the jobs are. Now, I went to Lindi, I went to Mtwara, small towns, big hype, very small towns. I went to Iringa, small town, big hype, but small town. Arusha, Tanga. All these places have extreme potential. In order to grow the housing, maybe industrialization is not a bad option. Put the industry there, create the jobs there, let the private sector come in and start developing and bringing low-income housing, surveyed plots, not just surveyed plots, but actually infrastructure, developed plots. So if you have 20 acres, just don't survey it, make a marking, and deliver it and say, buy plot number 65, and when you get there, it's bushland. No, the infrastructure development that's required by the private sector, by people like us, actually is you take those lands, create a boundary wall around, urban plan them, see which land usage pertaining to the geological, according to the site pertains to it, divide them down, bring the electricity, bring the water, bring the road inside that development, clear the bush, let people buy. You can still sell it for 6 times the cost if you do all these things. So profit is there. Nobody wants to build on a land that is going to sink once they put the second floor on, because nobody knew that it wasn't load-bearing land. So you do it, and the market is there. People are willing to buy. Banks are willing to fund. And somebody pointed out in one of my conversations today, I can't remember exactly, They mentioned that the amount of money lost by the banks, which is where they're becoming very strict in mortgage, but that amount of money lost is on those 10 million, 15 million, 50 million buildings, commercial centers. Who are you building for?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jason Dambala, the Chief Executive Officer of Arena Real Estate PLC, the first and the only public limited company dealing with real estate in Tanzania. We're soon listing on the Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange, probably in June to August. By profession, I'm a chartered financial analyst, having worked in India, Hong Kong, US, and a couple of other countries. What I have is not exactly questions, but I wanted to share a few more things that confirm what the panelists have touched on today. If I could start with Mr. Masebu. We know each other quite well. Okay. I would want to encourage my fellow developers, if we could, in terms of policies, rather than us waiting for the government to take charge, to take actions and form this sort of agency, we could do that first. We could put up a body that would sit with the government and share ideas. Because whether they like it or not, or whether we like it or not, we need one another. So rather than sitting back and waiting for them to make all these decisions, we could team up and form this sort of arrangement between the developers and sit with the state and find some way of consensus. In my opinion, it's a few systems are off, but we could fine-tune them with a couple of meetings. 50% of the population of Tanzania will be moving to urban areas. Again, supporting what Mr. Malik said, urban migration. So 50%. We are currently looking at almost 50, 60 million in Tanzania. So I'm talking about 30 million of those people moving to urban areas. And the data further suggests 60% of that 50% of the population, so I'm talking about close to 20 million, will be moving to Dar es Salaam. And in my opinion, I'm trying to find the words to further express myself, but with my experience, we're looking at cities like Mumbai and Delhi in India, Pretoria and Johannesburg, as he said, Karachi and Islamabad. Whenever the administration moves away from the commercial city, there is a boom. So we will struggle for at least 2 to 3 years, but there is a boom coming in. And that is all directed towards the low-cost housing, affordable, and retail, as what Mr. Bomani said. In Tanzania, use outdated mathematical formulas to assess and analyze their developments. People use formulas such as return on investment. That formula cannot work on real estate because, okay, what happens once your investment has been returned? You still have an asset which still develops.
My name is Sebastian. I'm a real estate developer in Zanzibar. We were mentioned before. We are actually doing an affordable housing project in Zanzibar, large scale, more than 3,000 units. So we study the Zanzibar market very carefully, and we are planning to move to Dar es Salaam with our ventures now. So my question to the panel is, affordable housing is always a thing of a perspective. Yeah? For some of you, affordable housing is something else than for many people in Dar es Salaam and the areas we talked about. When we're talking low-income housing in Dar es Salaam, what price range are we talking? Is there any study on that? What is the price range? We did that in Zanzibar. We are building apartments from $15,000 houses, townhouses for $40,000, and the market is amazing, and we're selling extremely fast. What is the experience you have about the Tanzanian low-income market, low-cost housing market? Are there any studies there existing already? That would be interesting. Thanks.
Making a design and just saying that this is what you're going to get for 30,000, a lot of people don't buy that. So do some research on it, increase your overall base, and see not the price point. You know, your questionnaire, research questionnaire should actually address the design and the progressive nature of this community. Everybody wants to be slightly different. We, over here, the mindset is not European. Mindset is not North American, that you will make brick townhouses across and it's Massachusetts and it will look nice. So everybody likes to be the Joneses. No. Mindset is different. People like their chicken running around.
I think this might be interesting though, and this is a very interesting comment. It's something that we have, that one of our biggest challenges is really, and we, on top of that, we introduced prefab housing, where all the agents in Tanzania told me will never work because if this wall doesn't sound solid, they will not buy. But you need a good sales team, and we're up to 65% prefab housing now, so which is a great success. You're right, so when we started actually the project, we started with 3 house types, which were all standard. Now listening to our clients and myself and the sales teams, we had thousands of clients talks in the last 1 year, 1.5 years. We increased our portfolio of houses to now, I think, 18, 19 different properties. But listening to the clients and then learning from them and then actually doing it. But the challenge, of course, in low-cost housing is, like Harry said, how do you still make profit? So it has to be a combination of standardization, economies of scale, to actually be able to build high-quality houses, because I think that's something in Tanzania we shouldn't compromise on anymore, is quality. We did that for too long. So high-quality housing, at the same time bringing infrastructure in place, which we are doing, and still making a profit because we're private developers, is the challenge. And so we're very happy about this conversation and this forum tonight, to learn and to hear what's going on. I was just on a big affordable housing conference in Singapore last week, where we had a discussion for all the developers around the world. We're all facing the same challenges, and many of these countries, even in Asia, have huge backlogs, like we have in Tanzania as well. So it's a huge market, surely, but it's challenging, and we need a good government and strong government supporting this segment in place to actually get this market rocking.
Actually, when you're looking at making money from this market, and you have a lot of research, you have a great team also, and great marketing, by the way, through and through. Money is by addressing the need, and my contention point with a lot of developers, and I work for Dege, the reason I came here was to sell Dege. My contention point is address the market. Take the prime things out of the market. The only thing you can walk away from this market, apart from the pricing and affordability, is people like to build, progressively build. Provide an option in those communities. Don't make the whole community 100% that it has to be built by you. Take the 20% chunk as a developer, make the money on the land and infrastructure. What that would do is, it will enable people, free up your cash flows, bring the cash in to develop the mid-sized sectors, and you can take the luxury end of your own community, build it out and make money on the commercial, like this gentleman just mentioned. There are ways that we can learn from the Indian market. You know, so basically looking and addressing, if developers start, not just specifically you or anybody, but if as a developers, for the community developers, they start addressing a mixed use, not a mixed use as in retail and residential build out, but a mixed use where you provide the land, let people have an option of building their own, but certain areas you develop. Certain areas are kept low cost, as this gentleman mentioned, to drive the community in. Community comes in, luxury housing sells automatically. As my esteemed panelist mentioned in his presentation, was that in 1990s or early 2000s or mid 1980s to 1990s, a class segmentation started happening, which is a natural process. It happens. Even in a jungle, you got the lions, cubs are on the side. So that's gonna happen. So you take that, the share where the profitability is the highest, because by building those And I'm talking or saying this based on experience working with developments which are 5,000 acres, 10,000 acres, build as a city, as a community inside other communities.
I think the issue there is that how much scale actually exists in Tanzania. I mean, you mentioned 10,000 units can be absorbed in Dar. The government statistics talk about hundreds of thousands, potentially 2 million units. I don't know the reality, and I'm interested to hear that you feel the number of 10,000 is feasible. But even up country, I mean, the Mtwaras and the Lindis, pale in comparison in terms of demographics and middle class, or people with jobs, to a town like Morogoro, for example. So I think it would be interesting to talk about what are these exciting opportunities outside of Dar es Salaam, because we tend to focus too much on Dar, and that's why I'm commending you for starting in Zanzibar and starting with a product, unlike some of your competitors, that's at least affordable, at least a good chunk of it is affordable. So that's an area that if there was time, we should talk in more detail.
I've also had the privilege of teaching at the university, at the university for over the last 38 years now. I've been into real estate for just as long, like my colleague Masebu, who also happened to have been my roommate and classmate. We've seen Dar es Salaam grow from the days when grade A office buildings in Dar es Salaam were, you won't believe it, the IPS building, the NIC Life House, Rahat Towers, and when this other building where Emirates is, Haidari Plaza, that's where I would take our students to show them what a modern grade A office accommodation looks like. So over the last 3-4 decades, that's how fast the Dar es Salaam market and real estate has grown. To the extent that we are now talking of a glut in office accommodation. Slightly differ with my colleagues that there's no supply for office. I mean, there's an oversupply of office accommodation, and then there's a glut, and then there's that's not quite true. What is true is that we have the wrong product in the market. We have the kind of office accommodation, office product, which is not what the market wants. The tragedy of it arises from the fact that most developers, most of whom are huge institutional developers today, only listen to two people when they are designing their offices and when they've made a decision to develop. Why? They listen to the architect, the second, who could now Google the most flamboyant and beautiful properties from anywhere in the world and call it their own. Some fancy glass houses. For those of us who did a bit of physics a long time ago, most of these glass houses in the tropics, a magnifying glass. Have you ever tried to put a magnifying, actually the experiment we used to do in primary school was using, a magnifying glass and zero it at a piece of paper, and there you are, you have smoke, you have fire.
My name is Solomon. I'm the CEO of K Finance Limited. K Finance is a microfinance, which we also finance home completions or improvement. I just have one question to the panelists. Most of the customers who goes for low-cost houses, majority of them have irregular incomes. So I just want to understand from your experiences, to what extent these majority of people, a lot of them with irregular incomes, is that an impediment to the takeover of these low-cost houses? Will the uptake be greater enough to support the growth? Thank you.
Sometimes they're working, sometimes they're not working. Also, the land is being purchased by usually a head of the family. So when you take a look at your average, and as you're in the microfinance business, your average middle income family over here, by the time they're ready to break their National Social Security Fund, they have 10 to 15 million saved up. That's where the boom is. That's where you have to provide decent amount of land, but infrastructure enabled. So they don't go out and buy 1 acre for 15 million in Kigamboni unsurveyed land. They'll be far more happy with 250 square meters with a proper infrastructure. So that's where the answer is, to catering to all the markets. So the irregular guy, you're right, that is majority of the people. People may, fundis come in, today they have the money, tomorrow they don't have the money. The guy might be doing construction job, today he's working on 10 houses, tomorrow, 6 months he has no job. The bricklayer, same exact scenario. So to cater to the blue collar working class, what you need to do is you need to create a product. Product cannot be construction, because construction materials are expensive. Half the materials are not even manufactured, which are cost effective in Darussalam. Import taxation is at all-time high, because the current government policies are deterring imports. They want to balance the budgets against the import, export, XYZ, as you can shed more light. So what are the options? The options are cater to the cultural need of progressive building. Provide the plots, but have them infrastructure ready. So the guy is not running first to get his title, then to get his electric connection, then to get his Devasco connection, then to get another connection. He knows his boundaries, he knows the policies, he knows what the land is for. Land is cleared, it's even. So when it rains, he's not living in a flooded environment either. That is the developer's job. Where the money is for the developer also, because it's a quid pro quo situation, give and take. So where the developer is helping building this 80% of community, he's going to make money. Where from? The land value and the commercial projects, like our Mr. I didn't catch his name, but a professor just mentioned, that take the offices to where people live. How can you take them there unless you have communities in places which are affordable? So when you have communities, when you have services which are provided to the community, when you have the internet connection which is uninterrupted, when you have power lines which are uninterrupted, when you have infrastructure, micro infrastructure in place for that land, communities will develop, will be more manageable, more progressive also.
They have not just participated, but they were very cooperative and supportive, and we are very grateful to be part of this successful event. And I'm sure most of you have found this night a very insightful one. So thank you very much. We can't do much about it. We have some appreciation certificate, so we're going to be giving you soon. Thank you.